nothing like the conversation of like, where does objective morality come from?
Yeah.
And that's why it's a little tricky because I will have pro-life Christians come to me and say, how do you answer this? I'm like, how do I answer it or how do you answer it? You know? Because those are different things.
And we're back. Welcome back. Monica Snyder's here from Secular Pro-Life. Let's have another conversation.
Yes. This one right up my alley.
This one's right up your alley. So set us up. What are we talking about?
We're talking about whether or not you need religion to be pro-life.
And the answer from Secular Pro-Life is?
No, you don't. That's it. Episode over. I told you we'd do a short one. Yeah. Realistically, this could apply to a variety of faith traditions in the context of the conversations we have. It's usually talking about Christianity specifically, but it's interesting. We get this from both pro-life and pro-choice people. From pro-life people, you're going to hear a more specific, usually it's something like, you can't have objective morality without God. If you don't believe in God, it's not coherent for you to believe in objective morals, and therefore we're glad that you oppose abortion, but your position is not coherent and the foundations for it don't really hold up. And so I guess the more nuanced thing would be that they would argue that you need Christian faith or at least deism to coherently oppose abortion. So that's kind of coming from some pro-lifers. Obviously not all pro-lifers, but. And then from the pro-choice side, I think it's more of a knee-jerk thing. I think it's less thought out. Some of them will make the exact same argument, which is without objective morality, but very rarely. Very rarely is that what the pro-choice side is saying, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
They're more saying, don't push a religion on me. And then I'm saying, well, I am an atheist. And then they say, that makes no sense. And then I say, what do you mean? And there's a variety of answers. I'm going to give you the more common case and then the Steelman case.
Okay.
I think the more common case is largely unthinking. Atheists are leftist and progressive and all these other check boxes of every atheist we've ever experienced. If you go to an atheist convention, you see certain kinds of trends, and you're not doing that. Right. So and that's not allowed.
The no true Scotsman fallacy, basically, just for atheists. Okay.
That's the more common, I think, reaction. I think the Steelman, and I have authentically tried to ask people this before because I really don't know what you mean. Yeah. Because I am, in fact, an atheist, and I am, in fact, against abortion, and I don't know what about those you think is incoherent. I know you don't like me, but like, what about it? You know. And the best I can understand it is what they mean is that there is no valid reason apart from some sort of faith tradition to place so much value on a zygote or embryo.
Yeah.
That's what they mean.
Well said.
And so you would have to be religious to care that much. Yeah. Okay, so those are kind of...
You're not, so this is weird.
I am not, yes. So those are kind of two different conversations. Yeah. They're related, but... Frankly, if I'm going to generalize, the pro-life Christian is going for a more philosophical debate about the nature of morality.
Yes.
And the pro-choice person, whether they are Christian or not, is going for, I don't know that they know what they're going for. I think that they're pulling at a thread they haven't really thought through yet. And so depending on who is telling me you can't be an atheist and pro-life will really change my response because they're different conversations.
Yeah.
So that's the table setting. What do you think?
So tell me a little bit about how you respond to the pro-choice people, because I suspect that we're going to probably camp mostly on engaging with the pro-life people that are making these comments. But since there are a couple of different kinds of pro-choice people, there's like the no true Scotsman thing. It's like, it seems weird. How can like anything? Like, what do you do with those people? Where are you trying to take that conversation?
I'll give you an array of responses that'll depend on the context and my mood. Yeah. But one of the things we used to do, and this gets less helpful as time goes on, but we used to point out that Christopher Hitchens, one of the most famous atheists in the world, had some pretty...
big concerns about abortion.
Pretty big concerns, pretty explicitly sometimes. Yeah. Now, there's debate about whether before he died, he had gotten to a point where he actually thought there should be legal ramifications. But to me, that's not actually a very concerning point because the debate about how ethics and law should play together is separate from the debate about if you think there's ethical problems with abortion.
Yeah.
And what isn't unclear is that he had serious reservations about abortion. Yeah. And it's kind of an interesting counter-argument because you don't have to agree with Hitchens on anything.
Right.
But that's not why I bring it up. I bring it up because nobody is questioning whether Hitchens was an atheist.
Yeah.
And he said some pretty damning things about abortion. So if you're going to do no true Scotsman, are you ready to let go of Hitchens? And then a lot of times they are. They're like, I don't like the way he had this position or that position, or he was misogynist or whatever. Yeah, but not in the sense that like he wasn't really an atheist, just in the sense that they're like, I don't care. And I'm like, okay, you don't have to care. You asked me.
Right.
You know. So sometimes we do the Hitchens thing. We do it less all the time because the longer it's been since he passed away, the less relevant it is.
Yeah.
Instead, sometimes I'll point to like, well, I'm right here, so how will you stop me? You know, we've done stuff where I did a speech at a meetup at the March for Life this last year where I was talking about how, you know, inclusivity and we don't care what your religion is, we don't care what your politics are, you know, da-da-da-da-da. And in my speech, I had in mind non-traditional pro-lifers specifically. Yeah. And at one point I said, like, you can believe in whatever you believe in and be against abortion because you can do whatever you want, okay? And that's me being indignant at these people telling me that I can't. Well, I'm gonna. So now what, you know? So sometimes it's just that juvenile,
like, I'm pro-choice.
Juvenile, like so, you know, sarcastic. Oh, I guess I have to shut down the group now. So good point. You know,
didn't realize that atheists were supposed to be pro-life.
Nobody told me. Call it all off. No, but if we're trying to have a real conversation, first I'll try to get them to tell me what it is about my position they think is religious. And sometimes they're not really clear, but usually it comes back to that embryonic life thing. And then I'll try a couple different things, depending on what we're doing. One of the things I'll do that I have found to get some traction is I'll ask them if they recognize that people grieve miscarriage. Secular people grieve miscarriage, pro-choice people grieve miscarriage. Not everybody grieves miscarriage, but all kinds of people grieve miscarriage.
But it's not only pro-lifers.
It's not I'm trying to take them out of the political debate of abortion and think about what we think of our
this is a great idea.
Embryonic life generally. You know, if you know someone who is not a conservative Christian person who has grieved a miscarriage, then you're starting to get a little glimmer of what I'm talking about. Now, you can't just jump from that to being against abortion. But I'm just trying to give you a little pause. The idea that it would be insane, that it would just be so crazy for someone who isn't specifically a devout Christian to place a lot of value on an embryo. It's not. It's actually, I think it's evolutionarily derived. Actually, I have some nuanced thoughts about that. But I think there's a good case to be made. You know, it's not weird at all to very much value your offspring. Sure. And then it's not that big of a leap from there to be like, well, then
why doesn't everybody's offspring matter?
Exactly.
To some level,
that seems to me to be a very easy couple of leaps. You know, again, I will say not everybody does grieve their miscarriage. Not everybody does value other people's. Sure. I'm not saying this is why you have to agree with me. I'm saying this is why this is a plausible pathway. Yeah. Okay. So I'll talk about miscarriage sometimes. And then sometimes I'll point to, we have been doing one interview a month for years of pro-life atheists and agnostics. And one of the things we ask them is, why are you against abortion? So sometimes I'll point to that, like, you can just skim. It's not just me. It's a minority position within secularism. Right. But it's not literally just me. You can read, you know, there's dozens and dozens here where they're telling you why. And they don't seem to find that is incongruous. And then the other thing I'll do is kind of, and this is a tricky thing to do, but in my opinion, what's usually happening here is pro-choice people are treating their view as some sort of neutral default that they found in the wild somewhere. And the deviations from it must be explained. So if the default is, making this up, that you have an irrelevant clump of cells until 20 weeks, and then now obviously it's a baby and it's not okay, they're not thinking about, why would that be the cutoff? They're not thinking about that at all. They're just thinking one is secular and maybe left-leaning, maybe whatever, so one is pro-choice. Explain why you're deviating from the orthodoxy, and they're not thinking about where they even got that. Yeah. And so what I'll do, I'll start to have a fetal person in conversation. I'll start to say, well, when do you think it's a valuable human being? Often when we bring up fetal personhood conversations, we're trying to provoke thought about why they should be against abortion. But in this case, it's a little bit different. I'm not necessarily saying why you should be against abortion at this time. I'm saying, when does it go from a religious belief, me apparently, to just a neutral, regular thing, you apparently? Or I'll say, listen, I don't agree that it's a religious belief. I fully acknowledge it's a philosophical belief. It is a philosophical belief that zygotes and embryos are valuable, morally relevant human beings. It's a biological fact that they are human organisms. It's a philosophical belief that they're morally valuable, blah, 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 blah. That is true. How you got from that to religious is a different conversation, but it is a philosophical belief. Like, biology, science doesn't say that embryos are babies. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
I just said that too.
Yeah, okay. But so I'll say, but you know what else? The belief that embryos and fetuses are so morally irrelevant that it's okay to kill them for any reason, that's a philosophical belief. The belief that bodily rights are so important that they supersede in all contexts regardless of anything else, that's a philosophical belief.
Yes, it is.
I don't know if you think it's a religious belief, because I don't know what your connection is between philosophical belief and religious belief, but I just want you to understand that if your thing here is you can't push your philosophical beliefs on others, then why are you arguing with me? Okay, what are you doing here, man?
Right.
You care enough about abortion rights. You care about women's autonomy. You care about women's equality. You care about protecting people from medical emergencies. All these things are valid things. You care enough about all of these things that you're willing to come argue with me about it, okay? And I just want to say, I understand that because you are taking your philosophical views that you care deeply about and trying to make other people agree with you about them. And I just want to say, that's fine. That's a normal thing to do.
Yes.
And that's what I'm doing, okay?
Right.
So we're at a tie right now, and I don't feel the need to justify why I want to enforce my philosophical views to you unless you want to justify the same thing to me. So where do you want to go from there?
Yeah.
And it's a very different conversation. So it's nothing like the conversation of like, where does objective morality come from?
Yeah.
And that's why it's a little tricky because I will have pro-life Christians come to me and say, how do you answer this? I'm like, how do I answer it or how do you answer it? You know? Because those are different things. But because for me, I'm basically saying, no, you. If it's a pro-choice secularist person, where do you get morality? Where do you get morality? I ask you first. I don't care. I don't care. How come you're not going to pro-choice atheist activists and being like, where do you get the morality that says that bodily rights are important if you're an atheist? How come you're not saying that? You know? Why are pro-life atheists the only group in this situation that has to recreate ethics from scratch to be in the conversation? Okay? I'm not gonna. I don't care. And the thing is, it's very easy for me to do that because the overwhelming majority of people we talk to don't take this approach. They don't start with, how are you grounding morality? They start with something to do with bodily rights, something to do with fetal personhood itself, or more often, something to do with the practical effects of laws.
Yeah.
That's where they
their
are.
experiences or something like that.
So,
yeah.
So I don't feel very, in fact, we have said at Secular Pro-Life overtly before, we've used the analogy that we start with the premise that human life is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ask people to be consistent enough to include before birth as well as after, and we talk about that. Yeah. If you're not starting with the premise that human life is valuable, I don't really have anything to say about that except for like, that sucks. I hope you get better, you know? But I don't feel like I need to convince you human life is valuable. I feel like there's plenty of other people for me to talk to. And also, I don't really believe you. If you're bothering to argue for abortion rights, you're valuing something, you know? We did have a commenter just this week. It was really sad. She said that she used to be pro-life and she's gone from pro-choice to, her words, pro-abortion because as she lost her faith, she used to be a Christian. As she lost her faith, she came to see that basically not just life is meaningless because that's like neutral, but that like life is suffering and nobody asks to be born. And that's why she thinks there should be more abortion.
So it's like an anti-natalist position.
Yeah, and very nihilistic.
Wow.
And I just, in situations like that, I just say, listen, I just want you to know I'm sorry that your loss of faith led to that kind of evolution of feelings, because we've seen that before.
Yeah.
And I said, for whatever it's worth, maybe nothing, I think you are valuable. I think humans are valuable, including you. I think it's good that you're here, and I hope you feel better soon. And she probably thinks I'm just being patronizing because it's the internet. But like, what else can you say in that situation?
Right.
You know, that's not about abortion. That's a different problem.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So then moving to how you deal with the pro-lifers.
Yes. So,
and we've talked about this before. Like, there's a certain kind of pro-lifer who is on your page a lot, talking about objective morality and whether or not anything that you say makes sense.
Lately.
Has there? I didn't know that.
I don't monitor our comments nearly as much as I used to because, and I'm very grateful for this, we hired a content manager earlier this year. But I do try to eyeball them. And I just saw recently one of our pro-life followers was saying, why do religious people keep getting on here and wanting to argue about this? So I kind of skimmed around to see if that's the case. I don't know if it's more than usual, but yeah, there's some pretty persistent ones.
Yeah. So what do you do there?
Usually, if a pro-life Christian is asking me about this kind of thing, it's because they want to know how to answer it. That's different. You know, I can try to teach them how I would do it if I were them.
Sure.
Sometimes it's because they want to know, you know. And you and I have talked about this before. There's different flavors of this. The question, the words could be the same, which is, what's your basis for caring about this? And some of them, they are genuinely just intellectually curious. Some of them, they're hoping to provoke thought in me that I'll find a contradiction in my worldview that will be the beginning of me converting to Christianity. And some of them are just, they just seem mad. And that's not the same thing. You know, some of them, you could tell there's an authentic earnestness.
Yeah.
And some of them, I don't know what's happening, but I get the impression sometimes that when some people find out I'm an atheist, they think I'm attacking them. And I think what's happening is they've had very bad experiences with other kinds of atheists. And they're reacting to that.
They're worried that you're going to be like this, like
an evangelical atheist. Like, you must agree with me, atheist.
Or like outspoken, like I'm really going to try to, like a crusading atheist.
A crusading atheist,
a Christopher Hitchens type.
Yes, exactly, without the cool accent.
Right.
And so,
very cool accent. And hilarious. I mean, just what a great sense of humor.
So all of that, I'll read all of
said,
well, sure.
But
I didn't agree with everything he said.
I appreciated him more than probably a lot of my colleagues.
I appreciated more than some of the other atheist advocates.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Whatever. Anyway, I'll read the context of what I think is happening there, and that will vary my response. But in general, what I will say is, 1, it is an assumption that if you are an atheist, you can't believe in objective morality. And usually I've already lost them. Okay? And this is out of my wheelhouse. You and I have talked about this. I don't like philosophy very much. I'm not very good at it. I feel like it's a lot of hand-wavy big words for things that we all kind of, like, I'm not the right girl for this, you know? But I have been trying really hard for a long time to be better about it.
Yeah.
Actually, in the last couple of years, Secular Life put together basically an advisory team of philosophers.
Nice.
It's just a group chat, you know, because I'm not very good at it. To help me, like, how do you guys think about this?
I bet, has it been helping?
It does help. Actually, I've got some star people.
I was going to say, like, I can probably guess a few of them.
You probably could. Yeah. So we did put together a blog post quite a while ago that's been very helpful to me. That basically is just links to either YouTube conversations or published articles, or I think even books in some cases, from philosophers that are arguing for moral realism from a non-theistic standpoint.
Nice.
Yes. I did listen to some of those videos. I felt like I should at least look into some of this if I'm going to show it to other people. And
I probably sent you one, right?
Probably. This has been a while ago. I will tell you, I did not enjoy it very much. but if you're into that kind of thing.
You didn't suddenly find yourself a big fan of philosophy after.
No. I mean, there was some thought-provoking stuff. There's a lot to that.
You got through it, though.
It was interesting. I did enjoy the collegial nature of it. And some of them were debates, some of them were just discussions, and there's some papers and things like that. But I put it together for people to say, you know, if you're interested, here are some philosophers talking about moral realism without theism. And that does satisfy some of the more intellectually curious people because they really are asking. They really are curious how that would work. And my goal here isn't to convince them of non-theistic moral realism. My goal is just to let them know that that is a school of thought, you know? And it's something that some people, not me, have thought about a lot and still think it's plausible. So that's the first thing, is it's a mistake to assume that if you don't believe in a God or the Christian God or whatever, that you can't believe in moral realism or objective morality. That's an assumption right there. The other thing is that even if someone is more of a proponent of subjective morality, it doesn't then follow that they don't care about anything. And at least for them internally, it doesn't follow that it's even incoherent for them to do so. They're basing their morality on other things that aren't transcendent to all human experience, but are still beyond just their personal preference. And that's why I find it very off-putting, and I know I'm not the only one, when we try to engage this conversation and someone compares like my deeply felt ethical views on abortion to ice cream flavors.
Yeah.
That is not convincing.
Right.
That doesn't speak to the emotional reality of what's going on. I get what they're trying to do, but it's very not convincing. And again, I don't feel like I'm really the right spokesperson for this, but I try to explain there is moral realism, theories for moral realism without theism. And also, there are plenty of theories for why people will care about something beyond just a preference, but not quite at the level of sort of this transcendent objective morality you're talking about. So those are the first couple things I point out. But the bigger thing, this is just strategy. If I'm talking to a pro-life Christian, you know, this is just strategy. Don't worry about it. That's my bigger response, okay? Don't worry about it. If you've got a non-Christian person, whether they're secular or something else, you know, that they are interested in this, they feel strongly against it. On one level, it doesn't matter why. I understand on like a spiritual level and a soul-saving level and all this stuff, it's always going to matter why to you. But on a pro-life activist level, it's not just that it doesn't matter why, it's that bugging them about why is actually sometimes very counterproductive.
Yeah.
Okay? So it depends on why the pro-life Christian is asking me, but I will say all of these things. First of all, there are coherent versions of this. Second of all, to be quite blunt, the overwhelming majority of people have not thought about the phrase moral realism and aren't worried about why day to day they have these strong intuitions about ethics. And I think that applies to Christians and secular people and everyone else. Yeah. I don't really believe that the majority of atheists or Christians or whoever very carefully thought about the philosophy behind their faith tradition and see if it rationally applies to their knee-jerk reactions to what they think is okay and not okay in society. I think that those all are in the mix together, but I don't think it's that rational. I think it's intuition mostly. And so that's what I talk about when they ask, do you need religion to be pro-life? No, you don't. However, in fairness to especially our Christian friends pointing this out, and really I guess the pro-choice people too, it is clear that religious people are more likely to be pro-life. There's a strong correlation. Yeah. There's no denying it. The statistics are there. Atheists are the most pro-choice demographic in the United States.
You don't have a religious book telling you anything about being pro-life.
Yeah, but we don't have a religious book telling us to be pro-choice either. Sure. And yet there's very high consensus. Atheists are more consistently pro-choice than any Christian faith tradition is pro-life. That's high consensus.
You're going to know better than me, but I would suspect that would have at least something to do with a big correlation between placing a high value on bodily autonomy, which I think atheists generally do.
This is a great question, because then the question is, okay, so why then? If you don't need religion to be pro-life, why do we see these really, really strong correlations, right? I don't have statistical evidence. I'm just speaking from speculation and experience. Yeah. First of all, I think most of it's tribalism. Straight up.
Yeah.
Okay? I think Christians overestimate how many atheists are atheist activists, or what I call evangelical atheists. And by that, I mean trying to get other people to be atheists. Yeah. I know plenty of atheists who you wouldn't even know they were atheists unless you explicitly ask them, because they don't believe in God or any of that stuff, and they don't really care. And it's not really...
There's a difference between thinking that it's fine for a bunch of people to believe in harmless fairy tales versus the anti-theist who's religion is harmful for the world.
Yeah.
Or at least you, if not the rest of the country. So I'm going to try to help the world by helping you.
Yes, exactly. I speculate that you could survey secular people about specifically their beliefs. Pew Research has done this, where instead of just asking people to self-describe, they'll say things like, do you believe there's an afterlife? Do you believe that the Bible is the inerrant word of God? They'll ask you specific things where you say what you believe. Yeah. And then you can compare what people actually say they believe to what labels they use. And I suspect that there are going to be people who have very, very, very similar, if not identical beliefs that you would call atheistic. And yet some of them will call themselves atheists, and some of them will call themselves not religious. Mm-hmm. And I would love to see a deep dive into the psychology of which they decide to say, if their beliefs are the same. Because I think that calling yourself atheist in a lot of contexts, it's more than just, I don't believe in God or gods. And it's kind of a rallying cry.
I wonder if some of the people saying not religious are would fall into the kind of category of people that would like to use phrases like, I'm spiritual but not religious.
For sure. And we know that because you can look at their beliefs. There are a subset of people in the Pew Research surveys that will say they're spiritual but not religious and that Christ is their savior. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. But I'm saying people who would say, I don't believe in God or gods or an afterlife, and they still don't say atheist.
Yeah.
And what's going on there.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think a lot of it's tribalism. I think that maybe even more potently than other demographics, if pro-life is considered to generally be a religious position, then it would be a threat to one of your core identities to say you're pro-life. I mean, we see this constantly. People accuse us of being secretly Christian all the time. But it's not just that you're worried about social repercussions. It's that who you surround yourself with will give you a chance to think about different perspectives. And if the only perspectives you get are either all pro-choice perspectives, obviously default, of course, or maybe you get some pro-life perspectives that are about God and religion.
Right.
You're not even weighing this conversation.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before. It's human nature. If you don't have encyclopedic knowledge of every single topic, you kind of eyeball what the people you are most similar to and tend to agree with the most, what they think, and you kind of go with that. And we know this anecdotally because secular pro-life, like I said, we interview people. We publish one a month. We've been doing it for years. And several of them have talked about, these are atheists, some agnostics, mostly atheists. Several of them have talked about how they'd never really thought about it. They weren't very carefully examining this debate and deciding they were pro-choice. They've been pro-choice the whole time. They never really thought about it. That's why it's so frustrating to me because I do think there is a small subset of low-hanging fruit of atheists that I wouldn't even need to really try that hard. I would just need to say well, I'm pro-life and I'm an atheist. And that would be enough for them to think, wait.
Right.
And they already have kind of the ethical predisposition and the ideas in their lives. We see a lot of conversion stories where it starts off with they're pro-choice and then they're personally pro-life, but still pro-choice. And a lot of times it has to do with experiences of miscarriage or pregnancy or someone they love going through something difficult. But they still don't feel like they have access to calling themselves pro-life because in their ears, that means Republican and Christian, probably Catholic, and that they're not.
Right.
And so they will still say they're pro-choice. I have a friend right now in my hometown. I moved there a couple years ago. We've been hanging out most of that time. When we started hanging out, she said she was pro-choice. And I take a very indirect route with interpersonal friendships. Like if you want to talk about it, we could talk about it, but it's fine, whatever. And over the years, she just told me a couple weeks ago that she thinks that actually her actual views on the issue are actually very, very, very similar to mine. And I was like, I know, sis. I can tell when we talk about it, you know? But it never, I don't know if I'd call this a conversion. Her views on abortion haven't changed. Her views on abortion were the same the whole time. She's adjusting her views on the label.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it's tribalism. A lot of our pro-choice detractors will point to the stats of how many atheists are pro-choice, and they think that that's an argument that therefore, obviously, it's a secular position. And I'm like, you're never going to convince me with that, you know? I also think, this is maybe more controversial, but I think that there is a subset of pro-choicers, like the woman I had just mentioned earlier, who are pro-choice because of a certain kind of nihilistic worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And I think atheism does not have to be nihilistic.
Yes.
But I think it tends more to nihilism than faith traditions.
Oh, I mean, almost.
And so I think there is a correlation.
Yes.
And it's about nihilism.
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong. I think there are plenty of pro-choice people who are not nihilistic at all. Point. And they're championing positive attributes and women's autonomy and medical freedom and all these things, which are a positive pro-choiceism. But I just told you about an example of the people who they're pro-choice, and honestly, their perspective is, I'm pro-choice because F it. Life sucks anyway. Why would we bring more people into this? Right. Right. And that can correlate with, we're all going to die in the heat death of the universe, so who cares, Right. I have seen, over the years we've been doing this, you think that religion causes people to be pro-life, and I think that that's often a pathway.
Yeah.
But I have witnessed people who went from pro-choice secular to pro-life secular to pro-life religion. And I think the pathway there was moving away from nihilism. That's what I think was actually happening.
That's interesting.
And so it wasn't religion that made them pro-life. In some cases, them starting to really, the kernel for them was, I really do think my babies mattered before they were born. I can't let that go. And then that sort of starts changing their position on, well, maybe life is really valuable. And for some people, that's perfectly compatible with a secular worldview. But for some people, I think they start to look for the tribes that are more likely to speak a positive human value and ethic. And to be frank, that is not usually atheists.
You said something really interesting about how there are some atheists, some perhaps narrow percentage, but there are some atheists that if they just knew that there was a pro-life atheist, like that might be just about enough. That might be sufficient, basically.
Yes.
We have an episode about this I'm going to link to. This is why just a few minutes ago before we started recording this, you saw, I introduced you to a pastor that happened to be out there, and I told him what I tell a lot of people, that Secular Pro-Life is maybe the most important pro-life organization that exists. And the reason for that is not just because I think you're awesome. That helps. But it's more important, it has to do with this persuasion study that came out of Stanford that we did a podcast about years ago that I will link to. But basically, it was just like atheists will have an easier time imagining themselves being pro-life if they hear that there are atheists who are pro-life versus if they heard a Christian's pro-life and they think, well, maybe if I became a Christian, then I could become pro-life. Like that's a much bigger leap. It's easier for them to imagine themselves having the view of someone who is similar to them in all these values, but is just different on this one
issue. You don't
have
to upend your entire life. You don't have, and this not just for atheists. This could be for anything. This is why I find more resistance from what we call traditional pro-lifers when we talk about Democrats than atheists.
What do you mean?
I mean, I feel like Christian pro-lifers are pretty ready. They're pretty used to a society that's always telling them not to shove their religion if they mention it at all. And they're pretty used to that paradigm of like navigating a secular-ish society when they're a Christian-ish person. They're used to that. But when I try to make the same kind of points about being welcoming to Democrats, I get more resistance.
Okay, so I've got a theory about that. What's your theory?
I think a lot of pro-life activists care very, very much about literally how you vote. And atheists could mean anything about voting. But Democrat, they assume, I think this is an assumption, will always vote a certain way and it will always mean a certain thing and it will always have a certain result.
Yeah.
And therefore you can't, so they say, I don't agree with this, you can't be pro-life and Democrat.
Right.
And
Look at Democrats for Life, just FYI.
Yeah, or Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising.
Rehumanize.
I have had pretty good success with this in private conversations with traditional pro-lifers where I say, listen, first of all, what you exactly just said. If you go to someone who, they're a Democrat, they are a Democrat. When you look at their positions on a bunch of different issues, they take very much Democratic positions. Yep. They have historically voted for Democratic candidates. There's a lot of things the Democratic Party embodies that they really value and that are important in their life. Yep. Okay, this is a major part of their life. Yeah. And they just fundamentally disagree with the Democratic Party on abortion. You need to respect that you, especially if you're arguing about how they must vote, you are asking them to sell out a lot of other things to do this. Now,
and maybe their own welfare.
Yeah, and maybe that's a persuasive argument or not. We try to stay very agnostic. Secular pro-life tries to stay very agnostic on the voting thing. But what I point out is, look, it's not like the options are pro-choice Democrat actively advocating for abortion or pro-life Republican actively fighting it. The reality is that you're going to have a lot of people who, first of all, not all pro-life Democrats vote for Democrats, first of all. Okay? It doesn't mean they're going to vote for Republicans, but a lot of them abstain, a lot of them vote third party, a lot of them will vote very intentionally and carefully depending on the specifics of the race. Like if it's just two Democrats running against each other, maybe that's one thing. So first of all. Second of all, even if you're a pro-life Democrat and you vote down the ticket Democrats all the time, okay, which is the thing that the conservative pro-lifers are like so mad about, okay? We can get into conversations about how much that actually plays into statistically what matters, but even leaving that aside, you could have a pro-life Democrat that votes Democrat ticket the whole time. Yeah. And then does a ton of stuff in their community to try to decrease abortion, and very important to me, serves as an ambassador to left-leaning pro-choice circles that are never going to talk to you. And we want these ambassadors because of what you just said. If you go up to a pro-choice Democrat and you're a pro-life Democrat and you have all this common ground, it's a simpler conversation. I'm not asking you to register Republican or convert to Catholicism. I'm just asking you to recognize that like this one thing sucks, right? This one thing. And you are allowed to be against this one thing, even as you embody everything else that is unexpected. Like I said before, you could do whatever you want. And what I want you to want is to oppose abortion and whatever else you've got going on. Yeah. So it is true that philosophically, on paper, technically, it would be great if human beings thought of everything rationally first and carefully analyzed all of their philosophical arguments and biological facts and potential. But give me a break, okay? Right. People are tribal, people are reactionary. And because people are tribal, it's very important to have members of their tribe that are like, well, I don't agree on that one thing. Yeah. It's way more persuasive. The biggest success story for this is Teresa Bukovac. So very, very briefly, Teresa Bukovac is Secular Pro-Life's board vice president. She is the founder of Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising. She's been in all kinds of activism all over the world. She's been arrested a bunch of times. She's a total anti-abortion zealot, also an atheist. She used to think that she couldn't be pro-life because she's an atheist. She and I met in San Francisco. I didn't even talk to her about it. She hired me to work for her at Starbucks. This is a long time ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she hired me to work for her at Starbucks in San Francisco. I'm not going to talk to my boss about politics or religion. I don't know what she's an atheist. I don't know what she thinks about abortion. I'm making lattes, She was a great boss, by the way. And then she moved on to another position. I friended her on social media after that because I don't friend on social media the people I work with, where I do now. And I didn't talk to her directly about abortion at all, but I was on the SPL page all the time. Yeah. And she saw it. And what I didn't know is that she's an atheist, but she was already strongly pro-animal rights, and she's anti-death penalty, and she's got these other worldviews that are very much like we need to be protecting the value of life, human life especially, animal lives too. Yes. And she was already starting to feel like, and she used to consider herself pro-choice back in the day as a very tribal, that's what we are. Yeah. But she's thinking about it more, and she's thinking about it in the context of the animal she's trying to protect. She's like, I don't know if this makes a lot of sense, but like, what am I going to do about it? And she looks at what she considers the broader pro-life movement. She sees nothing reflecting anything that she's like. Yeah. I don't know any of this. Everything I'm telling you, I didn't know any of this, okay? I'm just very obnoxiously loud online. And so she finds me and she finds Secular Pro-Life, and the way she tells it is, that was her. She was like, oh yeah, I can be this. And now she is one of the most passionate, dedicated, consistent, outspoken, brave pro-life activists I have ever met. I admire her tremendously. And all of that passion and dedication and all the work that she has done was jump-started when I just said, I'm pro-life and I am an atheist. And she is like a light went off in her brain. And she and I have both experienced, and so has our founder, Kelsey Hazard. We've all experienced other people where we say that, and kind of the best reaction you can hope for sometimes is kind of like, huh.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Wait a second. Yeah.
Suddenly a whole new world has opened up.
Yeah. And we're using atheists as an example.
Sure.
But it can be LGBT, it can be Democrat. It can also be Catholics, conservatives, and Christians in certain contexts where they feel like they're, it could be anybody. This is why there are so many people who are afraid to talk about being pro-life, especially socially. And I get it. And that's more true than ever.
Especially post-ops.
Especially post-ops, and especially the non-traditional ones, because they're very, very pro-choice social circles.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
And usually when you're thinking about what will happen if people know that you're against abortion, you're anticipating all the negative reactions, and that's legit. That stuff's going to happen.
Yeah.
But also keep in mind while you're doing that, you could be the beacon for other people like you who feel so alienated and feel like they can't talk about this thing that's very important to them and just feel kind of muted. And sometimes, a lot of times, all it takes is them knowing just one other person in their life who's with them, and then they feel braver. Even if they don't go and become an activist and grab a bullhorn, they just feel braver to talk about it sometimes.
Yeah.
So you're anticipating all the people who you know and love who are pro-choice who might be at best kind of weirded out and at worst mad at you. Fine. Some of the people you know are pro-life most of the time. And some of them are also looking for that support.
All right, I've got a couple questions.
Okay.
How do you talk to the nihilist when you end up figuring out that the main difference between you and the person you're talking to at a deeper level is the difference is it's not like you might agree on atheism.
Sure.
But this person is very nihilistic and you are not, and therefore you are seeing these things completely differently. What do you do there?
If I think they're being sincere?
Yes. It's just assuming honest.
Because I think a lot of them not, but yeah. If I think they're being sincere and there seems to be a lot of emotion behind it, like it's a mental health issue.
Like a hurt.
Yeah, because some people are nihilists in this kind of neutral way. And they're just like, I mean, I love my life and I'm glad I'm here, but I don't think it means anything. And that's more of a neutral thing. But if they're doing what I told you before, it's like, it's all pain in any way. And this person said that we should have fully paid for assisted suicide for anyone who wants their money back. And I was like, okay.
Their money back?
As a phrase to say, somebody forced you to be born. What if you don't like it?
Yeah.
With those people, I don't even bother to talk about abortion at all. I just say are you okay? I'm concerned. I'm concerned that you feel this way. I don't think that it's natural. I don't think we are emotionally healthy when we are this way.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, it's probably, they won't care about this, but it's definitely not evolutionarily derived. This is really destructive. And I want to know what's going on with you that you feel this way. If they're being snarky and aggressive, I might say if you really think that, then you have no reason to do abortion advocacy or any advocacy about anything because it's all meaningless anyway. I think there's a contradiction here because you do find deep meaning in some advocacy, and I'd be curious why.
Yeah.
And that's not me trying to convince you to my advocacy, but just there is something incongruous about caring passionately enough about stuff to argue for it and then say everything is meaningless and it's all heat death of the universe. I think that's incongruous. Or at least it seems very ad hoc if you're fine with doing it for your stuff, but then tell me I shouldn't do it for mine.
I mean, unless for I guess they're doing it not because they actually really care at a deep level, but it feels more like an intellectual game or puzzle to them, or they just or they kind of like proving people wrong or proving to people.
But then
that
that's not people I consider sincere. So if you're arguing with me about abortion, not because you care at all, but because it's an intellectual puzzle, then it's not really a sincere conversation.
That might not be what I meant.
Do you mean that the question of meaning of life is an intellectual puzzle?
Right. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a nihilist, and I'm not a nihilist, right? And I have spent very much time reading and talking to nihilists and figuring out what to say. I don't have anything terribly helpful, as a tip. I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of and I've spoken to some nihilists, and I'm really depressed. So I can understand some of it, right? And so I'm trying to get it. So I'm imagining a certain kind of person. Maybe this isn't the more representative person. I was imagining someone who's just I look out around the world and the suffering that I have experienced and everyone else is experiencing, it seems like there's more suffering than pleasure. That seems bad on a net negative for the universe, since consciousness is a thing. And so I'm kind of like, I'm not going to kill myself and I can kill a bunch of other people, but like, I'm not like super excited about extending my life. But then here comes like, basically then that person's like, if that's the filter that they've got on, then anyone that they come across who thinks differently, it might be like, they're going to react with something kind of nihilist.
I suppose my reaction would be to get into a conversation about nihilism, hopefully a good faith conversation about nihilism, but it's very hard for me to access because it just seems inconsistent what you're saying, especially in the context of abortion. Because I suspect this is actually just another cover for a fetal personhood argument, okay? Because
sometimes
if you're the nihilist and you're saying, you know, I look around me suffering, etc., I'm not going to kill myself, I'm not going to kill other people. Okay, pause. You're not going to kill other people, right? There's common ground. And for me, with abortion, you're killing other people. So now we're back at a fetal personhood discussion.
Except it's not common ground because they don't think it's a person. So
no,
you're
the common ground is don't kill other
right?
people. The common ground is you don't kill other people. The uncommon ground is a fetus a person?
Right.
And now we're back at a fetal personhood argument. Yeah. So it's not really, then we're not even arguing about nihilism anymore because if your nihilism precludes you from killing other people, then what do I care, man? What you really mean is you don't think embryos and fetuses are people yet, and it's not necessarily a good thing to bring people into existence. So it's really a fetal personhood argument.
I don't know. It feels like a straw man for some people that I'm thinking of. When I did the role-playing person saying, like, I'm not going to go out and kill someone, I don't mean necessarily they're doing that because of a moral belief. It might be more of a, like, look, I'm just distinguishing myself from like an extreme psychopath.
Maybe this is my unspoken belief that we need to examine. They are doing it because of some kind of moral belief, or at bare minimum, some sort of social construct. But I believe that even the vast majority of nihilists, on some basal level, they would be horrified at the idea of killing a bunch of people.
That's my hope. Like, that's sort of like the direction. Like, so like what I wrote down, because you got me to think of something that was like, maybe now this is what I would try.
Okay.
I think I would try talking about Oscar Schindler. I think pointing to beautiful examples of non-theists. I think Oscar Schindler was a non-theist. I'm not positive.
It doesn't really matter if he was or not. How did you feel about what he did?
He was mainly a German businessman, and sympathizer with, or like we had friends with Nazis and stuff like that. I don't think he was super religious. But regardless, like here is an example of this person who spent basically his entire fortune, and he never recovers after that, like saving, and he was like 5,000 Jews or something like that.
Sure.
Right? So like, I would want to ask a nihilist, like, is this completely like neutral? Would you be completely as okay with if he did nothing and all those people?
See, this is my thing. This is why I can't get around it because it is so hard as a human being to live truly as a nihilist. It's not our instinct at all.
Sure.
Okay? So this is the same argument that Christians make against subjective morality.
That's what I was about to say, but I didn't want to.
No, it is, and I recognize it. I recognize it.
Yeah.
People don't live like that. People don't feel like that. People don't behave like the day-to-day. Some people do. It's very rare. And usually they have serious mental health problems that are like diagnosable, that we can measure. And so it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where I'm having a good faith conversation with a true nihilist who also cares a lot about abortion rights. That's hard for me to imagine.
Yeah, I'm not describing. I agree that would be pretty weird.
Yeah.
So I'm not describing someone who cares a lot. I'm describing someone who, like, just those obnoxious people that want to debate everything.
Sure.
Like, every time they hear someone say something that they think is incorrect, they can't help. Like, I have some of this in me.
If I think that's what they're doing, I don't feel obligated to any particular conversation.
So that might be the right response.
All my responses.
Kidding. That's interesting.
There's two other things I do want to hit in this episode.
Okay, well then let's hit that.
The first one was, and I think this is an interesting question. Yeah. I firmly believe, as I have established, that you do not need to be religious to be pro-life, and that there are pathways for even now. I think there's a lot of secular people out there that would be pro-life if they realized that it was kind of an option. Not most of them, but there's a subset.
Yeah.
But this is a different question. In a country that is heading towards secularism, and I'm not like, there's debate about whether that's happening in the United States. Secularism has been on the rise for decades, but in recent years, I've seen people talking about how it seems to have plateaued. Depends on the measures you're using.
Has it?
I don't know, but that's been a talking point I have seen. Let's just leave that aside for now. Assuming we're in a nation that is heading towards a more and more secular society, is there a future for a pro-life movement in a largely secular first world country? And this is a very serious question because most first world countries are far more secular than the United States. And most first world countries are at least moderately pro-choice countries. The United States is an outlier in first world countries for the level of religiosity and for our fights about abortion. I don't think those are a coincidence. And the question is, let's assume for the sake of argument that the United States is going to get more secular as time goes on.
Yeah.
Can the pro-life movement survive that? Because even though I do firmly believe that you don't have to be religious to be pro-life.
Right. If the rest of the world doesn't.
If the rest of the world doesn't, or if the vast majority of pro-life resources are done towards other religious people in religious contexts, where are we going from here?
Yeah. That would be a big problem. I agree with that.
This is why my group is very important.
It is. Yeah.
But
I'll keep on banging that drum.
I've had people ask me that privately, and I think it's an intimidating question. I think it could be. I think it could be the case that you could have a very strong pro-life movement in a largely secular nation. I do think that.
It would be really hard, though. I mean, ask Retten to live in Denmark. Ask Denmark Right to Life what it's like to be a little pro-life movement in a very, very secular pro-choice culture.
Counterpoint may be hopeful. They don't have the legacy of a strong anti-abortion fight like we do.
Yes, true.
So I think we have a certain kind of inertia that doesn't exist in other first world countries.
Yes. That was my message of hope to the Danes over there, was like, look, I'm going to try to come and help you, and I'm going to try to help you fast forward through like 40 years of mistakes that we've been making in America, because you haven't been doing that, and you guys don't have some of the cultural stuff that we're dealing with here. It's just different, but maybe there can be that advantage. I've told the story many times, but I'll never forget this just wonderful, amazing pro-life woman. She's a heroine to me. Her name's Alnita. It's hard for me to pronounce because it's spelled Agnit, but it's Alnita. Okay. So Alnita is one of the Denmark Right to Life people. She's the one who reached out and invited me to come over. But I remember ending that conversation with this kind of like very Josh Brahmy kind of like, I hope that I can be helpful, but I just want you to know, my heart goes out to you. I know it's way harder for you than it is for us in the States, blah, blah, blah. And her response was, oh, it's okay. They won't see us coming. We're underground. They're not going to know. It's like, you're going to come and make us awesome, and then we're going to go out and be awesome. And that's what they did. They've been awesome ever since. That's 2018. They've been awesome. They've been killing it ever since.
And I imagine in those countries, it's a similar phenomenon to what we were talking about with atheists here. There's going to be a whole subset of people in any one of these countries that has not had this debate that are already kind of with you already.
Could be. So the hard thing for them is what they're dealing with is a lot of we already debated this issue and finished debating this issue 30 years ago.
I didn't finish debating this issue.
Yeah, I know. And maybe that's the snarky way that they ought to respond to that.
Well, we have that all the time here. I've talked to some pro-life activists who are actively looking to have debates with pro-choice people on college campuses and things, and they struggle to find people who are willing to do it. And I think that's a mistake on the pro-choicers' part. I think that some of them haven't caught up to the post-Dobbs reality that this isn't a settled issue. They were used to decades of, we already debated this and we're not going to. Well, I'm going to. I've seen pro-choice activists say, I was invited to debate, but I'm not going to because this isn't up for debate. Who are you kidding, man? It is clearly up for debate. We are debating it now at a state-to-state level. If you don't want to debate it, I'm fine with that. But we're going to keep debating it. So that was one of the questions I was grappling with is what would the future look like if the country does continue to increase in secularism?
Which I expect it to.
I do too, but I think there's a significant number of Christians who are hopeful that trend will reverse.
Sure.
And so for them, it's that's not a concern because they think it's going to reverse for various reasons or whatever. But also when you get at a state-by-state level, you're still going to have the same issue because there are some states that are much less religious than others. And if we want to get everyone, eventually we have to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's a tricky thing. I think that there's a theoretical version of this where that could happen, but I think in practice we see there's very strong tribal correlations between these things. And to be clear, I'm glad that the Christians tend to be pro-life.
Sure.
Keep doing that.
Yes.
That tribalism is good.
Yes.
Just the ones that disagree with me are bad. The other thing I wanted to bring up that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough is people talk about, do you need religion to be pro-life? And I want them to raise more often the question, do you need religion to be pro-choice? Because what I mean by that, what I was saying before is we're stretching the boundaries of how you define religious belief a little bit.
Okay.
But a lot of pro-choice people, if you get them to talk about fetal personhood, they will pick some ad hoc line in the mid-second trimester. And some of them will go even further and say not until viability or not until birth. And I just want to say it is kind of, in my view, a mystical perspective to suggest that you don't have a person or a valuable human being until birth. And you're condescending to me about being religion.
Totally bodily autonomy thing or something like that.
No, because the bodily autonomy thing would be, yes, it's a person and I don't care because bodily rights.
Right.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about there's no person there till birth. What are you talking about? You say that with a straight face and then accuse other people of pushing religion Okay? That's crazy, right? And this other thing you and I have talked about on this podcast before, there's other, I'll call them mystical beliefs to lose the baggage of what counts as religion or not. But there's other spiritual, mystical beliefs, and we've seen this very commonly, like the belief that a soul can just come back in a different fetal body. There are a lot of people who use that to comfort them about abortion.
It's like a targeted reincarnation. Something like that.
Something. Or it's very vague. It's not, it's not a doctrinal thing. It's a vague idea where they'll pray like, I hope God sends you back to me at some point. What that means, who knows? I've seen ones, shout your abortion accounts, where like a woman tearfully and mournfully had an abortion, and very, very shortly after her abortion, her friend announced that she was pregnant, and she interpreted that as the baby went to her friend instead. Okay? I don't think she said that to her friend, but that's what she wrote in the Shout Your Abortion account. And I'm just saying there's these pseudo-mystical comforting beliefs, that make this work out better.
Yeah, it feels like people believing the kind of things that they want to believe.
Well, that's what they're accusing pro-life Christians of doing too.
So that's a good example.
The other one that I wanted to talk about that this is for pro-choice Christians specifically. So what I just said was like, well, I don't know if you're a Christian or not. You just have something going on,
Yeah.
But for pro-choice Christians specifically, there's this approach to the questions of when life begins and stuff that almost makes it seem like as long as we call this a spiritual question, then the answer doesn't even matter at all.
Because spirituality feels kind of vague
and
already.
So we had, it wasn't even a pastor or a priest. I think the person who made this, there was a viral TikTok and we got tagged in it a bunch of times by this guy. I think he calls himself a spiritual advisor, and I'm not really sure what he means, but he has like a whole website and stuff. It's not just like a rando TikTok. But anyway, he did this whole video, very like earnest to the camera, like understand where you're coming from. And he was clearly talking to pro-life Christians specifically.
Yeah.
And he basically said, I get that you care a lot about life and life is valuable. I forget how he phrased it, but he said he has a friend who ran an abortion clinic. And he asked the friend, like, how can you reconcile what you're doing if you're taking lives or whatever? And they're like, he claims that the clinic director said, no, I do care a lot. And that would be very, very serious if you were taking a bunch of lives, if that was the case. But, the thing is, that's really a spiritual question. And I'm like, I feel like that didn't really answer my question. And so this guy goes on this whole thing where he says like, it's a spiritual question. We can all have different beliefs. And they act like they're being so accepting of you.
Yeah.
And this is a brand of pro-choice Christianity that we bump against it because pro-life Christians tag us in this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
It's like they want us to go fight with the pro-choice Christians, which is funny because we're not actually very equipped because we're just like, no. And no, just no in general. What are we going to do? Did I tell you Catholics for Choice blocked me on Twitter?
No.
Which is kind of a bummer, man, because I consider them sort of my counterpart.
They are kind of in some ways.
Yeah, but same thing where they would post things like, you can be a good Catholic and be pro-choice, and then everybody tags us in it. Why are you tagging me? Fight amongst yourselves,
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this spirituality, I would call it kind of a woo thing, but like this spiritual, not religious kind of mysticism that surrounds some pro-choice advocates. Me assigning motive, don't do that. I think there's a lot of people who are very ethically uncomfortable with abortion and they really want to still be able to be pro-choice. And so they layer on this other crap. That's what I think is happening.
The other thing that I thought, like, this is less charitable even than that. For some people, like that move specifically that the person who ran the abortion clinic does, like, is sort of a conversation ending thing. It's kind of like in the end, it's all very personal. Everyone's got their personal, very important personal views. You're going to have your personal view. I'm going to have my, it's very important.
Yeah.
But like,
but
then
so
what?
Important that we don't have to actually say what it is or do anything about it.
Or like, I'm going to keep on doing my thing, and you keep on believing your thing, and like, we just like move on. And it's
this
like,
is how they think. They convince themselves that they're neutral because they're like, we can all do our own thing, and that's neutral.
And that's not neutral.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my question for you before we close.
Sure.
And it's possible I've asked you this before, but because we've talked about the Christians on your secular pro-life page a lot, I'm interested. So I told the story in a different podcast yesterday. So Penn Jillette is one of my favorite atheists to listen to. When I'm spending time like intentionally listening to atheists, I really enjoy just the human that Penn Jillette is and the way that he thinks. This is the Penn and Teller, but very outspoken atheist who has written books and speeches and stuff. And I think a lot about a story he told a long time ago on his podcast. His like anti-Christianity podcast.
Is it an anti-Christianity podcast?
It's called Penn Sunday School. Like it's meant to be like a little
bit satirical.
I don't think it's meant to be satirical as much as maybe kind of mocking a little bit, maybe like that kind of thing. But like I don't know. I don't know how he would characterize it. But it's certainly a lot of times he's not mocking. It might be that like the organ theme music for the Sunday school, and the theme might be a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Whatever. Here's the point. A long time ago on his podcast, he told this story. So Penn and Teller unusually will actually spend more time after their shows than they do during the show. Just signing every single autograph and picture. Like, they will not let anyone not get to finish the line. They will go to the end of the line. So he's like, this is like a 2.5 hour usually, and our show's about 2 hours or whatever, is something like that. But that matters to them. And because he's an outspoken atheist, he occasionally gets Christians who will come to him and like, this is their like chance to do something. And he told a story one time of a Christian who basically like stood in the line for his whole time and handed him a Bible.
Sure.
And basically it was like, I wrote a little note. I think he wrote a little note in it, but it's kind of like, this is for you. I enjoy your stuff. Like, I don't think, they have a deep thing right there.
Sure.
But Penn was talking about the experience of getting that Bible and how he was not annoyed or upset or whatever, and not like, how dare you? He said, my attitude was, if you're a person who believes that because I have the wrong beliefs, that I am going to hell for eternity, then how much would you have to hate me to not attempt to evangelize me?
Sure.
Like, how much would you have to hate me to not try at all, ever, to try to save me from that? Like, he was like, I am so appreciative of this stranger who cares enough about my soul to buy me a Bible and write a note and give it to me.
And wait in a long line.
And wait in a long line and all of that stuff. I mean, they're awesome anyway. I would have waited in a line anyway. But like that kind of, so I'm curious. Like, there are a lot of obnoxious pro-life Christians that get on your page, but for some of them, this is where they're coming from, right? They're just like, they want to be helpful. What would you say to like the Pendulets who like are atheists, are kind of like encouraging people to evangelize to them, and saying like, I appreciate it when people do that. How do you react to that story? What are your like?
I mean, I totally get what he's saying. I joke with my husband that I don't literally think this is true, but I've joked with him that I might be one of the most prayed for atheists ever. Because,
I'm sure you are.
Because I'm in the pro-life movement, and I generally get along with people in the pro-life movement, and I know
you and Kelsey and
some
Teresa.
of them tell me, and I know a lot of them don't tell me, that they're just praying for me all the time, I think
that's sweet.
It is sweet.
That's
I get what he's saying, and I agree with the idea that this is a very good motivation, and we appreciate what you are trying to do. I agree with all of that. First of all, I think there are a lot of Christians who don't actually believe that I am going to hell. There's universalists who actually doctrinally don't believe it.
Sure.
But more than that, analogies to the pro-life movement, to the pro-choice movement, whatever, you've got your top tier people who actually really pay attention to the philosophical, political stuff we're doing. And you got people just living their lives.
Yeah.
And speaking from very personal experience, because I have family that are Christian, and we're an interfaith family.
Yeah.
I believe that there are a lot of Christians that either haven't thought about it very specifically, or because they love me and they love God, they believe that they don't really know how it's all going to work out, but they can't believe that the God that they love would send me to hell. And they're not sure how that works out, but they're not very worried about it because that's not the God they believe in. And it's not because they're universalists, not because they specifically doctrinally became universalists or thought about it. They're just like, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Okay? So first there's that. I think there's a lot of Christians that aren't actually worried about me going to hell. Or maybe they even kind of like on paper, like they think if you press them, like, yeah, if you're an atheist, you're going to hell. But like, it just doesn't internalize that way for them. I also believe there are Christians who do think if I don't get it together, eventually, that probably I will go to hell. I would say though, in those cases, and this doesn't just apply to Christianity, this applies to abortion. Yeah. Another one that's big for me is the vaccine debate. Pick any debate where you believe that the side you're taking has life or death consequences, okay? If it's that serious, then you need to care very, very much how persuasive you are.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Not just if you've tried anything at all. Okay? So if you're telling me...
at the wall
if you're telling me... Let's step away from the abortion debate for a minute. This 100% applies to the abortion debate.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
If you're telling me that if we don't keep the vaccination rates up to a certain percentage, then children will die, okay? Preventable... unforced errors, deaths. We've already figured this problem out.
Like measles and stuff.
Yeah, whatever. If you're telling me that, okay, then I expect you have every incentive to go find the people who are against vaccinating their children and persuade them. I'm saying this as a pro-vax person. I'm on the pro-vax side, okay? What I actually see, at least on social media, if people are making pro-vax arguments, most of the time they're being unbelievably condescending. They're accusing parents of not loving their kids. They're accusing them of killing grandmas. And all I see is a bunch of people who don't really care about persuading people. And if you don't really care about persuading people, how serious could it be? And I know that's not true. It's actually just a knee-jerk reaction that you're doing. You do really care, that you really do want them to vaccinate their kids. And you're just bad at persuasion and not thinking about the connection. But I have little patience for it because, especially pre-COVID, I know this is not an official secular pro-life position. We have people on all sides of the vaccine debate in secular pro-life. I'm pretty pro-vax, okay?
As well. Yeah.
And especially pre-COVID, which I feel like COVID made the vaccine debate so much worse. But especially pre-COVID, I was very frustrated about this. Yeah. And I was frustrated at people who weren't vaccinating, but I was even more frustrated at my side for being a bunch of jerks about it. Almost every post I saw was unbelievably vitriolic. And same thing with the abortion debate. When you got people who just want to go and say, abortion is murder, you're a murderer, okay? Then that's fine. You can do that if you want, but don't tell me that you believe that you're trying to save lives, because I feel like you don't really care about if what you're doing works. You stopped at, it's my job to say my truth. That's the easy thing to do, okay? Yeah. You know how easy it is to bluntly say your truth? I do that all the time. What's hard is figuring out where people are coming from, especially since they're all different, and then trying to build rapport and slowly over time truly get them to you.
That's just described my life's work.
I know.
It's like, it is really hard to get people to do that.
Yeah, you will do it. You will go through the energy consuming, the frustration, the having to nuance everything all the time and figure out where everybody is coming from because you want them to hear you.
Right.
You know, that's why you do it.
Also, you and I both have different views about the psychology of persuasion, one of our other favorite episodes, than a lot of other people do. Like a lot of those people actually think the more
the truth shall set you free.
Like something like the most ungarnished version of this truth will be more likely to set people free. Maybe they would think. And they're wrong.
Nuancing this more though, there are some people where if you just plant your feet and say things very directly, that will help. I just don't think it's most people.
Right.
And also, there's a difference between planting your feet and very clearly say, like bringing it back to the religion conversation. There are people that come on our page and they will say, you know, I'm making this up, but they'll say something like, you really don't have any good reasons to be pro-life unless you believe in God, okay? And I can't hear their tone. That's just like the phrase, right? That phrase is different than if they come on and say, you guys are idiots and you're incoherent and you da-da-da-da-da-da. One of them is just trying to very, very directly tell me the core thing they want me to know. Right. And the other one is mad and throwing a fit, okay? Yeah. Those are different. Yeah. And I find, and I'm sure you've seen this too, I'm sure we have all seen this, where the people who are often the most asinine are the ones who are like, I'm just honest. No, you're a jerk.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
you're a jerk.
Get rid of that phrase.
Yeah. You can be dishonest to honest. Here's the x-axis.
Right.
Dishonest to honest. And the y-axis is
obnoxiousness.
Total jerk to really nice.
Yeah.
Those are different axes.
Yes.
You could be the most persuasive, sweet liar. Yeah. But you could also be the most persuasive, sweet, honest person. That's actually the hardest one. Yeah. So level up, okay?
Level up.
Look, I say that as someone who has a really hard time sometimes not making it clear when I disagree or I'm annoyed. This has come up in my marriage. This has come up in my job. This has come up everywhere I've ever worked. Yeah, this podcast. So like, I get it, okay? But I don't go around, when I am too harsh, I don't go around being like, well, I'm just so honest, okay?
Yeah. You definitely wouldn't do that. I love this point. I think the pro-life people who are well-meaning and going on your page hoping that they're going to save people, I think that is different than the person who waited in line to personally hand-pen Gillette a Bible with a note in it.
Say more.
I think that person showed some level of care just in the fact that he wrote a note and handed it to a person and made eye contact with a person that is just not there when you're typing at someone in social media.
But I've had people do that kind of thing in person too.
And I bet that worked a lot better for you than if they just like wrote to you online on your public Facebook page. There are gradations.
The reality is, and maybe this is where Penn and I depart, like, I appreciate the motivation, but I wouldn't mind if you stopped. I would not mind. I would not think, oh, you hate my guts and want me to go to hell if you stop. I would think you were just giving me my space. And I think most people feel more like I do than like Penn does. I appreciate Penn assigning good faith motivation, and I think he's right.
Yes.
I think he is correct that if someone goes to that effort, that's their motivation. Where I disagree with him is when he tries to say, and therefore, if you don't do these things, you must hate me and not care if my soul burns in hell.
I don't think he would be like, I want you to keep on coming, like endlessly coming at me.
I'm saying I don't agree that if someone doesn't evangelize to me, it's because they hate me and want my soul to burn in hell.
Sure. That's probably kind of like a rhetorically like pointed way to put it.
Yeah, and that mentality is super fraught because with it, you could justify a lot of things.
Sure.
If I'm trying to save your soul from hell, and historically humans have.
Sure.
So
totally agree. In that context, he's literally talking about handing a Bible with a note in it.
I know.
So yes.
And there's an analogy here, not even just with religion. We see the same thing with abortion. If you really believe that abortion is killing babies, what wouldn't you do? And there's actually a lot I wouldn't do. So you know?
Yeah.
Just
well said.
know. So
thank you for sharing a bunch of perspectives. I'll just throw out like one interesting, I'm going to put this link in the description. I know I've mentioned this link before, but I know there are a lot of Christians who believe that there is no possible way for there to be objective morality without an objective moral lawgiver. I'm still haven't landed on that one totally, but I will just offer, if people are looking for a different view, a great YouTube debate to watch is William Lane Craig, who's considered like the top Christian debate guy, versus Shelley Kagan.
That's one of the ones on our list. I think you sent me that.
I sent it to you. Columbia University, it's a really interesting debate. It's, I think, the biggest time I've seen William Lane Craig lose a debate, but I think he really did lose that debate. Doesn't mean I necessarily agree with Kagan and everything Kagan's saying, but it's good for people to hear a thoughtful person give the alternative view if they've only heard a bunch of Christian apologists their entire life saying there's no way to do it, there's no way to do it.
Yeah, trying to falsify your view, right?
Yes.
I have a fuller list, including that and others that we can give you.
Send it to me, I will link to it.
I forgot to say too, this year I was invited to publish in the Human Life Review, and I think the question was, is belief in God necessary for the pro-life cause to succeed? And I wrote an essay there that summarized a lot of the things we just said here.
Nice.
Yeah, so we can link that too. Yeah.
Love it. We'll link to all those things. There's more where people can go. Come back in 2 weeks. We have at least one more of these we're going to do before we're out of time.
All right.